Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you may be. Well, I am teacher Leonardo Trevas here from Senac, Pernambuco. And well, I'm here to teach you a little bit about the United Kingdom, more specifically about the United Kingdom's electoral system, political system, and we're going to talk about the following elections, general elections that will happen on July the 4th, 2024, which is an interesting day, right? It is the day of the United States independence, and it was chosen, this date was chosen by the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak of the United Kingdom. So, guys, I would like to tell you that it is a pleasure that you are here listening to this and watching this asynchronous class. And I wish to say to you, to wish you a very good São João. We are here in Recife, Pernambuco, close to the date of the São João festivities, right? So let's start, shall we? Well, I have prepared a little presentation for you guys. Hope you can see it well. So these are the UK elections of 2024, right? You can see on the left the map of the United Kingdom. It is comprised of 4 countries. The island of Great Britain, you see the island of Great Britain. In this island you have the country of England, the country of Scotland, and the country of Wales. And this little bit here that is floating up in space actually should be attached to the island of Ireland, and this is Northern Ireland, which is also a part of the United Kingdom, right? So the UK elections, they comprise all of these 4 countries that are part of the larger country, which is the United Kingdom, in Portuguese, Reino Unido, right? So my name is teacher Leonardo Trevas. You guys know me. If you don't know me, hello. Nice to meet you. Well, first I'm going to talk a little bit about the system, the political system of the British democracy, right? It is called the constitutional monarchy, which is an interesting name, right? Normally, when we think of monarchies, we think of king, like Louis the 14th, right? An absolutist king, the king that would have control over everything, over all. His will would dictate policy and would be its subjects. His subjects would be completely overwhelmed by that power. So, yeah, but that's the medieval sense of monarchy, right? In modern day monarchies, I think almost all of them, the ones that still exist, at least all of the ones in Europe, they are constitutional monarchies, right? So you have Spain, you have you have Monaco, you have Andorra, you have Denmark, and also you have the UK, which is pretty much probably the most famous one. So a constitutional monarchy. Why is it called a constitutional monarchy? Well, that means that the head of the state is the king or the queen, and the head of the government is the prime minister in the specific British case. What is head of state and head of government? So the head of state is this symbolic figure, this figure that should, be part of the symbolic mentality of a place, right? In Brazil, the head of state and the head of government are the same person. Currently is the president Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, right? So he's the head of government. That is, he has political power. He has a democratic mandate, and he can use his political power. And he's also the representative symbolic figure for the state of Brazil, the República Federativa of Brazil, right? Uh, the case of the United Kingdom is different. So the prime minister is the head of the government. He has the political power. And the king or the queen will have the symbolic power. So the prime minister is the leader of the party that has the majority of seats in the House of Commons. He or she is appointed by the monarch. Yeah. So he is an elected official. You elect the prime minister. Yeah. You elect members of parliament. And these members of parliament, one of them will be the prime minister of the United Kingdom. Currently, it is Rishi Sunak, right? I have a little ant on my glasses. Bye bye. The monarch is currently Charles III, right? King Charles III. And they become monarchs by inheritance. So they're always part of the royal family. King Charles became the monarch after his mother, Queen Elizabeth II, died in 2022, right? So immediately after her passing, King Charles became the monarch. It is a type of government system where the powers of a country's monarchs are limited by the constitution. So yes, it says constitutional monarchy. So it's the opposite type of monarchy from the absolutist system that we were talking about before. This type of of uh, of regime is predicated on a democratic basis. So there's a constitution of the United Kingdom. It's a strange one because it's not like the United States or the Brazilian constitution, which was written at a fixed moment and then amended and everything else. Here in Brazil, we have the 1988 constitution, which is the current one, and it has its amendments, but it was written in 1988, and in England it's different. The law is based on precedent. It's what they call common law, yeah, which is the Anglo-Saxon Germanic style of law, of justice. Common law means that the laws, they are based on precedent, that is, on what has been done by custom, by mores. So the Constitution of the United Kingdom is a collective sort of ideas that have been practiced and used as precedents for millennia. Yeah, in some cases, for more than 1,000 years. Others are more recent, but they were not published in paper at this one moment in time, just like the American or the Brazilian constitutions were. So they are collected, and there are the constitutionalists. These are people who study the constitution, and when you have a question about the constitution of the United Kingdom, you go and look at those books, and then you decide what you need to do. It's a little bit different from what we're used to here in Brazil, right? So let's continue, guys. Who is the king of the United Kingdom? Where's this man here? It's Charles, yeah? He was known for a long time as the Prince of Wales. Yeah, he's the first born son of Queen Elizabeth. And you can see from the picture that he's quite old. Yes, he's in his 70s, right? So he became king at quite an old age. Why? It's because his mother lived for a long time, right? Having lived for a long time, his mother had a long reign. It was the longest period of reign of all time. I think in the if you think about the UK history, right? The previous longest monarch was Queen Victoria in the 19th century. So Charles III, he became the king in September 2022, right? Immediately after the passing of Queen Elizabeth. Now, the monarch in the UK in modern times, he has very little direct influence in government. His role is more ceremonial, more symbolic. Yeah. Uh, he has the right to ask a prime minister to form a government in his or her name. We're going to see how that works in a little bit. He can dissolve the parliament before elections, and he can give advice to the prime minister. This dissolution of parliament, it's a normal process. It's nothing related to dictators. People think, oh, the president has dissolved Congress, like it happened here during the military dictatorship. Yes, that's in presidential systems, right? In a monarchy, in a constitutional monarchy, it's normal. Parliament is always dissolved a little bit before elections. So currently, today is the 11th of June, 2024. Parliament is dissolved, right? It was dissolved a little bit over a week ago. And but what happens is that the current government is still going on until the elections, right? So continuing, he can give advice to the prime minister. So his role is more of like influence, of little sideways influences, but he cannot dictate things. So, for example, this will never happen. King Charles coming and telling the prime minister, "Hello, I want you to change everything. I don't like this city of London. I want you to destroy London and make a London 2.0." He cannot do that, right? That's not possible in a constitutional monarchy. The parliament should be actually the body, the institutional body that passes laws and governs, right? So King Charles is mostly an advisor of sorts. If you guys have watched the Crown, the TV series The Crown from Netflix, which is quite a good TV series, you'll see that Queen Elizabeth, in many times, she has audiences, right? She has these private conversations with the prime ministers, with the many prime ministers that she had during her reign, right? And in these conversations, of course, in the TV series, they are fictionalized. The queen, she will give advice, say, "Oh, I don't think this is a good idea," or maybe you should. Why don't you do this, or why don't you try that? But she's giving advice. These are suggestions. The prime minister may accept them or not. Yeah? So that's why the constitutional monarchy is a democracy. Yeah? So the king or the queen, they don't have real power. Okay? Let us go to the next page. And we'll talk about a little bit about the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. It's this man currently, Mr. Rishi Sunak. So Sunak, he's an interesting person. You can see that he is of Indian descent, right? And he's the first British Asian Prime Minister of all time. This is really important in the sense of, a country such as the of Great Britain, such as the United Kingdom, being a place that had lots of racism for a long time. You guys know that as an empire, it conquered half the world, and it subjugated many different peoples, the Indian peoples, the peoples from Southeast Asia, many African nations, also here in South America, the Caribbean. So many Canada and the United States, many of what nowadays are sovereign countries were part of the British Empire, and the policy of those times were they have a very racist policy towards people who were not white, right? So it is just by the fact that the Sunak is the first British Prime Minister of Indian ancestry, this is already a very interesting and important thing. Nevertheless, let's talk about a little bit about the role of the PM. Well, the PM is the leader of the majority party in the House of Commons. The House of Commons is one of the two houses of Parliament. When you talk about Parliament, you think about the Big Ben, right? Ding dong, that tower, which is one of the symbols of London, Britain, etc. The Big Ben is the tower, the clock tower of Parliament, which is a very large building, very old. And there are two different houses inside Parliament. The most important one is the Commons, right? The Commons is where all of the MPs, the members of Parliament who are elected, they sit. And it works a little bit like the Câmara dos Deputados here in Brazil. Yeah. So this is the house that passes legislation. They create legislation, they approve legislation, they debate it. The difference is that the House of Commons also elects the Prime Minister and the government. So both the legislative and the executive powers are in the same institution. That's interesting, right? So in presidentialism, just like Brazil, yeah, we have three different powers, right? We have the justice system, you have the executive, and you have the legislative. And in Brasilia, our capital, you can see the Supremo Tribunal Federal, and next to it is the Palácio do Planalto, and next to it is o Congresso, right? And these three buildings, they're in Brasilia, they represent, and they are the physical seat of these three powers. In England, it's different. So the legislative and the government, the executive, they are in Parliament. Yeah. The justice system is a little bit different. There is a Supreme Court, but it works in a different way in the England. We're not going to talk about that today. So the Prime Minister is necessarily a member of Parliament. That is, he will be elected just like anybody will, any other member of Parliament, and he's not particularly special because of that. He just goes through an election and gets elected. But then there is an election inside the party, his party or her party, that will elect a leader. And by precedent, the leader of the party that has the majority will be the Prime Minister. Currently, Rishi Sunak is the leader of the Conservative Party, also known as the Tories, and he is therefore the leader of he's the Prime Minister, since the mandate of the Conservative Party has been going on since 2019, December 2019, the last election that we had. So he became leader in October 2022. Let's talk a little bit about Sunak himself. He's, as I said, he's of Indian descent. His father and mother, they immigrated from West Africa to Britain, and they were also of Indian descent. And they were, if I'm not mistaken, his mother was a pharmacist and his father was a doctor. Upper middle class people, and they made their lives in England. And he was born in England, right? He was born in the United Kingdom, so he is a British citizen. He is socially conservative. That means he's more morally conservative regarding like themes like LGBT, uh, about social justice, inequality, that kind of stuff. And he's a center-right politician with a technocratic leadership style. That is, he's more pragmatic, and he is mainly one of those guys that will like to cut taxes and make people pay less taxes, less government spending, etc., etc., etc. He's a neoliberal politician, right? He was a hedge fund analyst, so he worked in the financial market. It's more or less like the Faria Limers here in Brazil. And he's married to Akshata Murthy, who is a billionaire heiress. So her father, his father-in-law, is one of the richest men in the world, an Indian billionaire. And as I said, he's a British citizen of Indian ancestry. The PM, he forms the government, right? And he appoints other members of parliament to become cabinet ministers. Normally, these ministers, for example, the Home Secretary, yeah, he will be in the Foreign Secretary. They will the many different posts of cabinet positions will be the chancellor, which is like the finance minister. These posts, they will be the other members of parliament from his party will be these people who will occupy these cabinet ministries. It's interesting because these cabinet ministers, they're also called front benchers. Yeah, they sit in front of parliament. So if you take a little look at this image here, just a sec, you will see, yeah, that the front benchers, the people who sit on the front, this bench here in the front, they are normally the cabinet ministers. So they are the most important people. And to the other side, this is the opposition, right? So they should be sitting here, but they are not for some reason. I'm not sure. This man here sitting in the middle is the Speaker of the House, whose job is pretty much to orientate and to be a middleman and mediate debates, right? Uh, Keep order, and he should be neutral, right? He should not be from any party, and he is also a member of parliament, right? So coming back here, being the head of government, he's able to dictate policy, make decisions, and has the ultimate responsibility for the country. So whenever you have like G20, G8, you don't see King Charles. You see Rishi Sunak. You see the prime minister alongside the president of the United States, the president of Brazil, etc. So he's the head of government. He wields actual political power, right? A little sip of water. And this is Keir Starmer. Now you take a good look at this man. He's probably going to be the next prime minister. Why? We're going to see. So he's the leader of the opposition, the leader of His Majesty's most loyal opposition, right? So he's the leader of the party that has the second largest majority in the House of Commons. So, as I said, the party that has the most amount of seats in the House of Commons will form a government. The second largest majority, the official opposition. So it is actually a title, and he has some prerogatives as leader of the opposition. It's an official position. The current leader of the opposition is Keir Starmer of the Labour Party. So the Labour Party is the main adversary of the Conservative, the Tory party. Mainly, it is a center-left party. Um, it comes from the socialist tradition, from the working class tradition, while the Conservative Party comes from more of a merchant, businessman, entrepreneur tradition, right? So these two are the most important parties in the United Kingdom and have been for more than 100 years. So all of the governments, all of the prime ministers, they, except for one time, they were either from the Conservative Party or the Labour Party. The opposition's role is to scrutinize, fiscalize, and offer alternatives to the government's policies. And the leader of the opposition, he appoints MPs of his own party as shadow ministers. The shadow ministers, they are responsible for scrutinizing the government ministers. So, as I mentioned, right, they will be sitting here on the other side of the House of Commons, right? This part here, they would be to the right, they would be sitting, and the leader of the opposition would be sitting here, directly facing the government ministers and the prime minister. Yeah. Um, oops, let me go back. Sorry. A little bit about Mr. Starmer, right? He became leader in 2020 after the Labour Party suffered a major defeat in the December 2019 elections, and the previous leader, whose name is Jeremy Corbyn, resigned. So Jeremy Corbyn was more to the left than Keir Starmer. And that election was not good for the Labour Party. They lost quite badly, and it was worse than expected at the time. So when that happened, there was a big discussion around the Labour Party of what path should they go to, and there were local elections for there were party elections to decide who would be the next leader. He's known for being a progressive center-left politician, and he was a human rights lawyer before entering politics. He grew up in the suburbs of London and is from a working class family. So his background is quite different from Mr. Sunak here. Now, part two, a little bit about the Parliament, House of Commons and the House of the Lords. Now, the House of Commons, as I have mentioned before, is the most important one. It's more or less like the Câmara dos Deputados, right? And it's considered lower house. I put lower on the quotes because it's not worse than the other. It's just a term that people use. Its members, they are all British subjects. They are citizens of the United Kingdom. And they must not be part of the nobility. So they cannot be aristocrats. They cannot be peers. It has 650 members. MPs are elected to serve their constituencies and take part in debates, discussions, and voting. The majority party are currently the Conservatives, and the opposition is Labour. An MP is elected by the first past the post system. I will explain about that. So the first past the post system is like this. It's something that in Brazil, it doesn't really exist. It has been discussed. In Portuguese, we call it voto distrital. So instead of here in Brazil, when you were to elect a vereador, deputado estadual, federal, or you have this proportional voting, right? So you have the number of seats at the Câmara dos Vereadores, let's say 50 seats, and then you have X amount of votes, and you divide these votes by the parties, and then you make a calculation, and then you have the number of proportional candidates who will be elected. It's a little bit more complicated, but it should represent the totality of votes better. But the thing is, if I'm voting here in Brazil, and I'm from Pernambuco, in my elections, I'm voting for all Pernambuco. So I can vote in a candidate from Serra Talhada for deputado estadual, even if I live in Recife. That's not a problem. I can, if I am living in Recife and I live in the Casa Amarela neighborhood, I can vote for somebody, for a candidato a vereador that is from Boa Viagem, and that's not a problem. In England, it's quite different. In England, the districts, right? They call them constituencies. So you have 650 districts. Each of these districts has one MP. And these MPs will be elected by the people who live in that neighborhood. So they will not be allowed to vote. You will not be allowed to vote for a person from Manchester if you live in London. That's just not possible, right? Um, it's quite an interesting system in that sense. So what happens? Let's say that Leonardo Trevas, the teacher, is a candidate for the Trevas party in the constituency of, let's say, Whitehall in London. I don't live in London, by the way, but let's imagine I do. And my candidates are Mr. Chico Bento from the Conservative Party, Mr. Cebolinha from the Labour Party, and Miss Monica from the Scottish National Party. I get, after the voting, I get 10,000 votes. Mr. Cebolinha gets 9,000 votes. Monica gets 200 votes. And Chico Bento gets 8,000 votes. Who got more votes? I did. So I won. And I am going to become the member of parliament for the constituency of Whitehall. And I'll be, my party, the party of the Trevas, will be participating in parliament represented by me. And only me, because this is a party of one. In practice, what happens is that the House of Commons is divided by these ideological and party lines, right? So in blue, you can see the Conservative Party. In red, the Labour Party. In yellow, the Scottish National Party. And in orange, the Liberal Democratic Party, right? So this is more or less the first past the post system. You can see quite well the majorities being formed here, right? The House of Lords. The House of Lords is an interesting thing because it's a thing of the past, and in my opinion, it has no reason for its existence in the modern world. But let's take a look at it. It's a much bigger house, 784 seats. But the members of this house, they are not elected. They are lords. That is, they are part of the nobility. Now, this is a very old institution. It's been there since the 11th century, more or less. So 1,000 years, right? In the past, they used to be actual nobles, like dukes and barons and earls and whatever. And they would be a body of these feudal lords that would try to, rival the power of the king. So absolutism was never like as big a thing in England as it was in other countries such as France, because of the idea of parliament, right? So it was always there checking the power of the king. And for some time during the English Civil War in the 1600s, parliament actually murdered the king and became the government. The prime minister of sorts became Oliver Cromwell became king for some time. So it's quite an interesting system, but this is not anymore. This doesn't work like that anymore in the recent times, right? So the members of the House of the Lords, they are peers, also called peers. And back in the day, they used to become lords by inheritance, just like the royals. So if you are the son of a member of the House of the Lords, if your father dies, you become a member as well. Now this doesn't work anymore. So the only lords who are who have inherited the post, they are very few, less than 100. And most of the lords nowadays, they are peers for life. That is, they are appointed by the monarch, by the king or the queen, to become lords. And normally what works is that these lords, they are ex-members of parliament, they're ex-prime ministers, people who have retired from their political life, and then they sort of start becoming lords and participating in the discussions in the House of the Lords. Now, nobody really cares about the House of the Lords nowadays because they don't wield much political power. They're basically a revising body. So what they do is that when a law is passed by Commons, it goes to the House of the Lords, and the Lords check it. They can spend 1 year checking a bill and revise it and suggest changes, and then it goes back to the other house and it passes or not. But they cannot really not pass a law. That doesn't really work, right? Another interesting thing is that you have the Conservative Party, the Labour Party, the Lib Dems, but you also have bishops of the Anglican Church. That's crazy, right? That's kind of crazy. Imagine a priest participating in politics. Wait, actually, that happens in Brazil, but never mind. And you have the crossbenchers, who are the ones in gray here, and who are people who are lords who are not affiliated to a party, right? Moving on, let's talk about the elections. That's the most important part, right? So on July the 4th, 2024, that's less than a month from when I am making this video, there will be the elections. Yeah. So following a period of 14 years in power, the Conservative Party might lose to Labour, making Keir Starmer, remember Keir Starmer, the probable next prime minister. Yeah. The election was called by Rishi Sunak. So the prime minister has the power to call elections. In every mandate has a 5-year period, but the prime minister may call elections whenever they want. This time, Rishi decided to call the elections on July, a little bit 1 month before the elections. So the period of campaign is very short, and nobody really knows why he did that. Something that we'll know in the future or not. But some people have said that it is a strategic mistake. He could have called it at a later date. It was called on May 22, and Parliament was dissolved by the king, right? So when elections are called, the current Parliament is dissolved, and a new one will be elected. So every MPs, they stop going to Parliament and they stop working. The polling day will be on July the 4th from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. That's the whole day. And the results will come over the course of the night. So it's not like here in Brazil, we have the urna eletrônica, which is a beautiful thing, an amazing invention. And we know the results of the elections 3 hours later. Yeah? In the UK, it takes some time because they vote on ballot boxes with paper. Cavemen. So yes, you have to write on paper and they have to count vote by vote. It takes some time. The last election in 2019 had a firm conservative majority, and Boris Johnson was elected prime minister. This is Boris here. And the interesting thing about the UK elections is that they have been the Conservative Party has been in power for 14 years. And a lot has happened since that. There have been 5 different prime ministers, all of them from the Conservative Party. And there were many crises in those 14 years, right? So there was the Brexit referendum, the Brexit deals, the COVID-19 pandemic, the cost of living crisis, the Israel-Gaza war, the Russia and Ukraine war. A lot of stuff has happened, right? The first prime minister is David Cameron. Yeah, he took office in May 2010 until July the 16th. Well, part of one of his campaign promises was to promise the Brexit referendum, that is that the UK would leave the European Union. He promised it, but he was not in favor of it. So what happened in the end was that the UK actually left the European Union. So the remainers, right, the people who didn't want the UK to leave the European Union, they lost for just a little bit. And David Cameron, who was a remainer, he decided to resign. What followed was that Theresa May was chosen the leader of the Conservative Party and became prime minister. She was she was the second woman to become prime minister in the UK, the first being Margaret Thatcher. She tried to make a Brexit deal, but that didn't work. The party fractured in the middle, and she was betrayed by her own party. Craziest thing. So she resigned after 3 years in power. Then you had Boris Johnson. Boris got elected in the 2019 election, our last elections, with a big majority. He's a very charismatic person, and his catchphrase was "Get Brexit done." So he wanted to finish the Brexit process and get a Brexit deal. He did that, and he was very popular for some time. But during the pandemic, there was a scandal called the Partygate, that they found out that Boris Johnson was having a party and drinking beer and having pizza in the middle of the lockdown, while everybody was at home and couldn't go out. He was there having fun with lots of people. After that, there was several other crises, and he resigned as well. Then you had Liz Truss, which lasted only 45 days in power. She tried to make this mini budget that had like cutting taxes like crazy. And it was, these were very bad economic decisions. And what happened was that the economy of the United Kingdom tanked really hard. Stock market broke. And she was compared to a lettuce because they made a live stream of a lettuce bought in a supermarket, and they asked the question, who is going to last longer, the lettuce or the prime minister? And the fun thing is that the lettuce, after 45 days, the lettuce was in a better state than Liz Truss. So her government was a complete failure. And Mr. Sunak has been the prime minister ever since. He has been criticized for poor dealing with the cost of living crisis, that is the inflation, the purchasing power being very bad, the NHS, which is the SUISH, the universal health system of the UK, and a very strange thing, gaffe that happened last week, that he was supposed to go to the D-Day commemorations in France, and he spent like half an hour there and left. And he missed being photographed with Joe Biden and all of the important people, and everybody was saying that this was a gaffe, and he shouldn't have done that. And also, let me tell you another thing. What are our expectations, right? So the latest polls, they say that the election is going to be won by Labour by a landslide. You see, it's 650 seats. You need 326 for a majority. These polls, they are saying that Labour is going to win by 472. That would be a great victory. Yeah. So if you compare the 2019 results down there with the 2024 prediction, yeah, we don't know if that's going to happen. It's still a prediction, but these are scientific polls. A 472 majority for Labour would be better than the last great victory that was in 1997 that elected Tony Blair the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, and that was the last Labour government that was really popular. Yeah, and the Conservative Party would almost cease to exist. Right, 76 seats comparing to a 365 majority from the last Parliament. Um, so according to this polls, it's going to be a great victory for Labour. The thing is, we still have a few weeks of campaign and we don't know what's going to happen. My bet is that Labour is going to win, but it's not going to be this landslide that they have predicted here. Nevertheless, now when I'm making this video, the parties are releasing their manifestos, which is a document that lists and explains the campaign promises and policies for the next parliament. And there's a guy called Nigel Farage, and he's a little bit like a Bolsonaro. He's a right-wing politician of the Reform UK party. He has announced that he's going to run, and people are saying that this party can become one of the next big forces of the parliament, even trying to rival perhaps the Conservative Party. And he's trying to surf on those right-wing waves that have been going on around Europe, especially since the European elections that happened in June. Now, what will happen? We shall see. Follow the news, guys. If you are interested, go on YouTube, follow the BBC, follow ITV, New Statesman, The Guardian, these good media vehicles, and get good information, because, you know, UK elections, they may seem far away, but what happens there resonates here in Brazil. So be sure to turn on your devices, turn on your television, your cell phone. And on the 4th of July, yeah, I will try to make a second video talking about what really happened and discussing what was wrong, what was right in the predictions, and maybe we can discuss this as well, right? So thank you very much. This is Mr. Sunak on the left, Mr. Starmer on the right. Thank you very much for watching, for listening, and I'll see you there. Cheers.